Hello, this is the Ramblings of an Indisciplined Mind podcast for Friday, August 26th, 2016. As of this recording, Sierra is still missing. So, today I thought I'd bring you a podcast review. One I don't think I've mentioned it, but I've not talked about it in any depth. And that is this podcast called Book versus Movie. And one of the hosts of the show I mentioned because she's a publicist and she made an appearance on the How Is This Movie podcast about the life of a publicist and what's involved with that. So, but this is, that woman's name is Margot, and the other woman that's involved in it, her name is also Margot. So I never have problems remembering the first names of the ladies that are running this podcast. So they do just what the name of the show implies. They read books that movies are based on and either watch the movie or have watched the movie, and then they compare them and talk about where they're different. And I've listened to actually several episodes of this show. If you listen to the earlier episodes, the sound quality isn't great. They were basically doing it over Skype, so it sounds like a phone call because it was. The more recent episodes, sound quality is much, much better. Obviously, you can kind of put up with it because you listen to this thing with all the automotive sounds and all of that. So, but they have really interesting discussions. I've enjoyed several. I've listened to several of them. Now, if you're doing a Venn diagram of my movie interests and their movie interests, there's definitely an area of my that they don't talk about, and there's some movies that they have talked about and books that they have talked about that I haven't watched or have no interest in. So I won't be listening to everything that they have, but I have listened to several. And they'll usually start off talking about the book. And a lot of times they'll give a bit of a feedback, a bit of a synopsis of it and what they liked and what they didn't like about the book. I was a little disappointed they didn't do that. They did this, they did The Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which is a book that I read, but I read it a long time ago. And I never got around to seeing the movie, which sounds like it was a good thing. But they didn't really go through the plot at all. Because I got too busy talking about the people. Apparently, this is based on a real murder and with real people, and despite the fact that it's, they even felt that it was fictionalized to a certain degree, it's portrayed as a true story, so it uses all the names, or at least most of the names of the real people and whatnot. The one that I really found interesting is they did Blade Runner. Which is one of my all-time favorite movies. And they read the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. And I'm pretty sure that I have read that at some point in the past, but I think it's been a long time because there was a lot of the details they were talking about that I did not remember that are significantly different than the book, or than the movie, excuse me. And then they talked about the movie. And one of the things that's interesting is that, the term Blade Runner was not in the book. The term replicant was not in the book. So some of the terminology that really gives, Blade Runner a lot of its ambiance, we're not in the book that Philip K. Dick wrote. And they felt like it was a pretty good adaptation, but they obviously did a lot to change it. And they talked about those differences, and that makes it interesting. I did learn a couple things that I did not know. I know there's been multiple editions of Blade Runner. I actually have the director's cut. And there's some deleted scenes inserted, and they removed the Harrison Ford voiceover that the theatrical release had. And what I didn't realize is that there's actually been 3 editions of this movie out. The main theatrical release. You had the director's edition, which was released in the early 1990s, and that's what I have. And then apparently in 2007, I think it was, Ridley Scott released another version that's kind of his official version. And I don't know that I've seen that version. And it got me thinking about, I have seen Blade Runner on Amazon Prime being available, and I'm going to have to check and see if it's still available and see if it's that version, because that would be interesting to see how it's different. So I may have to check that out. The other thing which they talked about, and I believe I knew this, I believe I'd read this, but there is a scene in the movie where Harrison Ford is in his apartment with Rachel, and she's getting ready to leave, and he stops her from leaving, and he slams her up against the wall, and kind of starts this tells her to kiss him, and it's very what's the word I am looking for? It's very domineering of Deckard, and to me it's always felt kind of rapey, really. It's obvious, you don't see it on screen, but it's obvious they have sex after that. And, just how consensual was it? Does it not matter because she's a replicant? It's always struck me as an odd beat in the movie. And the Margos definitely agreed and with that, and we're kind of uncomfortable with that a little bit. Fortunately, it's not a super long scene, but it was kind of weird, and they didn't really care for that bit either. And so on that, we are in agreement. I also listened to the first episode. Actually, I listened to was Field of Dreams, and that was interesting because I've seen the movie several times. I've read the book, and I remember the book, and that was a nice discussion. Going back to Blade Runner, one of the things that was cool was they aren't science fiction readers. It's not a genre they typically read, but they did enjoy it, and they felt like they got a lot out of it. So I thought that was cool. I was kind of curious because they seem to be more of your mainstream literature readers, and not science fiction, and that turns out to be the case. But they did get into it and did enjoy it, and it was a great discussion. And the same thing with Field of Dreams. They had a great discussion on that and comparing the book to the movie. And there are a lot of differences. It was interesting because it's been a while since I've read the book, although I do remember the majority of it. And they pointed out areas where, for the movie, even though the movie is great, they really kind of watered down some characters, like the Annie's brother was really more malevolent and not quite evil, but he had his own agenda, and it was more about him than trying to protect the family or protect his sister or any of this stuff. It would seem to be the motivations in the movie, and so that was interesting to get kind of a fresh take on that one. If you do listen to that one's kind of, this podcast has only been around for about 2 years. So that was one of the relatively early ones. So that was one of the ones that was phone conversation quality. But they do have some interesting content. So it is called Book versus Movie. I believe they spelled it out, versus, Versus. They also spell out book and movie. I mean, imagine that. And they are on Twitter, they are on Facebook, they are on Instagram, I think. So you can look for them. I think Twitter, they might be actually VS instead of spelling out the verses, if I remember correctly. But yeah, if you're interested in movies and the books that spawn them, I would recommend checking it out. Like I say, I'm not going to listen to every episode, but if there is a movie that and book combo that really piques my interest, I want to hear them talk about it, like Field of Dreams, like Blade Runner, I will listen to it. Other things I will probably give a pass to. I haven't listened to their entire backlog. I've cherry picked. I do feel like they've inspired me to maybe be more cognizant of if there's a movie I love, but I haven't read the book for it, to go ahead and do so. I usually try to do that, but you never know. I could have missed some. Or there might be some I need to revisit, like the Philip K. Dick book. So I'm going to have to add that to my list once I get through this epic tome that is the Alexander Hamilton biography. But that's all I had for today. I think I'll be back tomorrow. I'm planning on it. We're not going away or anything, so my intention is to give you an episode. I got feedback. I have to do an episode. What am I saying? So I will be back tomorrow, and I'll be talking to you then. So, be seeing you.